So my name is Glenn Farid, and I'm a civil society activist who's worked in the sector, and I am here participating in this process in support of non-profits engaging with the new legislation and rules that are coming from the Financial Action Task Force and the national legislation that is followed from those country assessments and processes. I think critical for civil society and for South African civil society in particular is getting to grips with the entire architecture around the FATF process. So both the continental and regional bodies that exist and how these interlink to the decision making that impacts on us as MPOs in South Africa. So I think at one level that was really important for people as information and awareness. For most African civil society, a common theme that emerged is the relationship between the FATF Recommendation 8, its interpretation, and the national framework for non-profits. In other words, how we understand the enabling environment either inhibited or utilized in the FATF Recommendation 8 by national governments to the detriment of civil society. So I think we were sharing experiences between countries and regions and understanding how we can best promote compliance with the intention of Recommendation 8 and the FATF framework, while ensuring that civic space and the role of nonprofits is not undermined behind utilizing new laws and regulations that can then be punitive on civil society. I think in the South African context, we are very unfamiliar with the questions of anti-money laundering and financing terrorism. In our country, we have premised our legislation and our enabling environment frameworks on a very clear understanding of our Constitution and the rights that are guaranteed within the Constitution, the freedom of association, the rights to dignity, etc., etc. And our laws have by and large mirrored and echoed our constitutional framework, which is of course the supreme law in our country. These recommendations are, however, speak to an evolving context for the African context and globally on the need for us to update and harmonize our legislation. And I think it's important to understand that these are happening in parallel to a general recognition of the limits that our legislation, which was passed in the late 90s, have actually come up now 20, 30 years later. So I think the fact that these two processes are happening simultaneously are important, and they create an opportunity for us as national MPOs in South Africa to engage once again in a 360 review of our legislative framework and what an enabling environment would mean to all of us today. I think in our context today, we have suffered from a lack of coordination amongst non-profits. In part, this is because the sector has grown exponentially and phenomenally since the NPO Act was passed in 1997. And so diversity and complexity require new frameworks. But built into those frameworks, we have to be able to both future-proof our enabling environment, as well as ensuring that it's fit for purpose. So how do we embrace complexity and diversity of the sector without impinging on constitutional imperatives, while at the same time ensuring that an enabling environment exists that capacitates all parts of the sector to comply with legislative and now, as we understand it, international requirements. So safeguarding the interests of the sector while capacitating the sector are going to be critical elements moving forward. Awareness of legislation, awareness of the implication of the legislation, and ensuring effective capacity is in place for the sector are necessary. So I think there's a triangulation that is required between the donor community and the giving community and our philanthropic organizations on the one hand, our regulatory bodies in their diversity, as well as then the actual sector. But I think the biggest weakness that we've encountered is not the technical competence of the sector, nor the desire to comply, but really the absence of a coordinating mechanism for the sector to draw on and open up the space to be resourced effectively to meet these challenges and to give voice to the actual experiences of NPOs. And we have to emphasize that the sector is an essential element of our democratic dispensation. Underinvestment with over-regulation or overly complex regulation can in fact have detrimental impacts. If we have disinvestment by donors and over-regulation by the state or regulatory bodies, we will place the sector in danger. And that is a danger to our democracy as a whole. So reinvesting, recapacitating, and building coordination and voice for the sector, I think, are critical. The sector is an important partner in development. It's an important element of democracy, and underinvesting and over-regulating can kill something that is really essential to our overall health as a society.